Welcome everyone to a sparked AU Core Technical Design Group meeting as we're making our way through AU Core R2. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Danielle Tavares-Rickson. I am at CSIRO and I'm the fire lead for Sparked, and I'm a co-chair for the AU Core Technical Design Group. I am one of 7, so I'm chairing the meeting today. Shelley is taking the minutes for us. Thanks, Shelley. And I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country. And we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we all gather today. And we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend our respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, acknowledging the First Peoples as the first scientists, educators and healers. In terms of today's agenda, we'll start as we always do with usual business. It's time for a check-in on AU Core R2 status. We kind of set the direction we wanted to go in December last year. And we're coming pretty quickly up to the 50% of elapsed time, but kind of the end almost of development. So it's time to do a bit of a check-in on what we wanted to do, where are we, and what do we need to do in order to go through to ballot and publication of R2. So we'll do that. And then really, I think the main focus of today is a number of JIRAs or change requests for the HL7AU fire specifications, and also international ones are managed through a JIRA project that is managed by HL7 International. And so there are a number of change requests from the backlog that are being looked at to be addressed in AU Core R2. We're prioritising the normative ones. So we've got 2 first here around immunisation and encounter to have Landon and then Rob go through those. Then we've got some informative and editorial kind of changes, and we'll see how much of those we get through in this meeting and then what needs to be held over to the next meeting, which is what we'll close the meeting with in terms of looking through the agenda for our next call in a fortnight. Now, before I move on, can I ask, is there anything else that needs to be on the agenda today? All right, I'm not hearing anything. If something occurs to you later, let me know, whether it's an announcement or some other kind of item. Just pop your hand up or put it in the chat. Okay, so let's go through usual business. First part is approval of minutes of the last meeting. These were sent round, and I'm just going to them now. So they have all the necessary content in them around attendees. We've got the recording, our slides, a transcript and a chat log here. We've also got the actual minutes themselves. There's no outstanding feedback on those minutes. But does anybody need more time to review these before we look to approve them? All right, I'm not hearing anything. So I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Who would like to motion?
I will, Dushi.
Thanks, Dushi. And who will second?
Happy to second, Landon Riley.
Thanks, Landon. Are there any other comments or questions on the minutes while I look for our electronic poll? Okay, I'm going to launch that now. So you see a poll for you to approve the minutes of the previous meeting. You can vote affirmative, negative, abstain. If you've dialed in and can't see this poll, you can just say your name and what your vote would be, and you can also put it in the chat if you have otherwise don't have access to this. Like Landon, for example, who I think you can't vote because you're co-host. Okay, I'm going to count that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll end that poll. And I'll just double check, Landon, were you able to vote?
No, +1 for me, thank you.
Affirmative?
Affirmative, sorry, yes.
Okay. So with Landon's inclusion, that is 20 affirmative, 0 negative, 13 abstain. The motion carries, the minutes are passed. Thank you. Okay, let's go back to our business. So actions. There's an open action here that's on us as a technical design group to be looking at what out of the backlog or otherwise do we want to address in R2. We're coming down to the last couple of meetings before content closure, really, for AU Core R2. And so there's a sort of almost a last call coming out here for people to assess that and make sure they bring forward anything for consideration for inclusion into R2. This was the call put out in our last TDG meeting and was also sent out as part of the last email. I'd like to reiterate this. If you have reported an AU Core JIRA, as in you've got a set of changes, please have a look at those and think whether or not we should be looking at including those in R2, and also consider what we've already included in R2 and whether or not there are other changes that you think that we should be looking at addressing before we put out an updated working standard for Australia. So just wanted to highlight that. A couple of people have identified some items, some of which we're going to go through today. So thank you very much for those people. All right, updates and news. Conformance Fridays, they're back. We went through those last year in terms of AU Core to establish a baseline on conformance requirements from a core perspective. And this time, it's going to work through patient summary. So there's an optional fortnightly series of meetings that's going to look at things like what does must support in patient summary mean? And it's quite relevant to us because patient summary is intended to be compliant to both core and IPS. So it needs to have a look at and kind of answer the question on how does a downstream IG from core be compliant to AU Core? And I think that might also feed in some changes or some clarifications potentially to AU Core. So this is going to be, well, from my perspective, I think this is going to be really interesting. And if you're interested to be involved and you don't already have an invite but would like one, you could let me know, or you could email sparked@csiro.au and we'll forward that to you. These are open calls, they'll be recorded, and they'll be available on YouTube, and there'll be some discussions about them. But they're primarily sent out to the patient summary mailing list. And that's it for updates, unless anyone else has any other updates they want to share. All right, let's move on to this part, which is having a look at where we are and just a bit of a check-in and forward planning. So, quick recap. We had our December scoping workshop. We went through and determined what we were going to really have as a focus for R2 and what the priority inclusions were. And we've agreed that the focus for R2 is to support the downstream projects. At the moment, that's e-requesting and patient summary, and ensure that we were supporting what those needs were as they're reported to us. To also look at enhancing coverage of AU CDI. We had noted that R1 of AU Core covered a large amount of AU CDI, but it hadn't covered everything. And we wanted to look at making sure that we addressed that. And we also wanted to have a look at enhancing our existing content. So refinements and feedback coming out of actual implementation, more people trying to exercise or consider this once AU Core R1 was published. So where we are is that we have completed the new profile work. So that's done. We've included and agreed AU Core related person, medication statement, and healthcare service. So we agreed on a baseline draft in our last meeting, and that's already in the AU Core Fire IG, the continuous integration build. So that's out now. And we've also looked at and agreed on the medication use statement enhancement for AU CDI coverage. So we're here now. We're on to going through and just making sure we are addressing any of the enhancements, the specification feedback, whether that's clarifications, whether that's removing or adding search parameters, or looking at terminology or must supports on the content that we have in here. And we've got a few meetings to do that in. Another kind of view of this, if we look at it across our development life cycle, is that we're at the end of the development point, and we're now coming into this actual testing portion, testing and refinement, before we put out the ballot for working standard. So we're basically here now. And that testing event will happen in June. And that will give us some of those results on any of our normative changes we didn't yet have testing before we go into proposing what essentially is the updated working standard for Core. And of course, when we put that over the timeline, that means that we're still going for ballot in around August. And there'll be some connectathons there. And we're looking to publish in, again, January, end of January, for AU Core R2. So that's that 12-monthly cycle. Essentially kind of looking to publish about 12 months on from when we did AU Core R1. So I just wanted to quickly highlight for people, for those of us who have joined us, because a number of people have come on the journey on AU Core R2 who weren't on the journey for R1. And it's fantastic that we've got some new members coming in. And I wanted to highlight that ballot for working standard, that's the mechanism from HL7 AU and from HL7 International that looks at evaluating content, puts it out to the community, and says, this is essentially what is being proposed. We want you to evaluate this. We think this is ready to implement. And by ready to implement, that means like this is ready to be exercised in real world environments. It's not that we're locking it down to be normative, but this needs to go out and be a working standard and evolve with the community. And this ballot process allows us to get the feedback, and also at the end of it authorizes essentially publication if we pass ballot. And we're going past ballot for comment, which is something that happens usually in the earlier part of the life cycle, as R2 is more of a maintenance release than driving massive volume of content change. And that means we're looking at kind of maturity levels of at least AFMM1 and going up. AFMM being the Australian Fire Maturity Model levels. Looking at time, I think I'm only going to cover a little bit of this, and we can do more of it in ballot planning. I just wanted to remind people that we do have the content from AU Core R2, sorry, AU Core R1, which is already at AFMM2, but we've added new profiles, and that means we need to go through this maturation process for medication statement, related person in healthcare service. And we're kind of in this QA period now where we had an idea that's been proposed. We've talked about it and included a draft in the IG, and we're now going through testing and looking at feedback to move past the QA period and into a consideration to achieve the first level of the maturity model. And then through ballot, we will look at AFMM2. So I'm going to skip past actually the maturity model content. We can talk about it maybe next meeting and just go into this bit. This essentially is a little bit of a schedule for us for where we are now versus going to the ballot for working standards. So we've got these meetings and the testing event on the 24th of June. And we need to publish the ballot snapshot actually on the 4th of August. So the ballot period doesn't open till the 11th, but we do have to publish that earlier there's some tooling requirements behind that, where in terms of HL7AU, it gets loaded up into the ballot tooling to make all of this kind of work. So this is where we are. And we've got 3 more calls before the testing event. And so we would like to prioritize the normative changes as much as possible to be coming through in these calls so that we can actually then test them before we're putting something out to ballot. It's not a hard prerequisite, but very much there is a preference that if we have significant normative change, that we've gone through and evaluated that through a testing kind of process. And then after the Spark testing event, we'll go through any of the feedback from that and probably consider here our AFMM levels and start looking through any of the informative JIRAs. And the last sort of call for changes will be made in this meeting, because this one here, we don't actually want to be making any changes here. This should really be an assessment of readiness for ballot and going through our QA.html, which is essentially the automated validation report, that and just walking through that and making sure we're aware of or have accepted any of the remaining errors or warnings in there that might come from tooling, so that we're comfortable with what we're proposing for ballot, and then out it goes, and off goes AU Core R2. That's essentially what we've got for progression. I'll just pause here and say, are there any kind of comments or questions on this time frame? Hopefully this isn't coming as a surprise to people. All right, I'm going to take silence as yes. This is definitely exactly what we thought would happen and not stunned. So let's move on. Okay, how are we going to progress? Normative, normative, normative. It's all about the normative. Do you want to change? Is there something you think, based on the scope of R2 and our focus, that we should be considering changing? If it is, let's schedule that. Let's actually get that into a schedule. Let's talk through it, like we're going to talk through some really shortly, and make sure that whatever we're proposing for AU Core R2 is the best baseline that we can have that we're proposing. So that's the action still on people. This are the people on this call, and also the rest of the community, to consider, is there actually anything that you think needs to be addressed? And to please let me or another co-chair know, so that we can add this to the schedule on the agenda, and then we can actually consider how to address that prior to going to ballot. Okay, that's it. It's all the same thing. Testing event. I talked about it. Quick reminder, it's out. You can register for it. Registration closes end of next week, folks. This is in Brisbane. It's on the 24th of June. It's a 1-day combined testing event. So it's going through core, patient summary, and e-requesting, and is of particular interest, I think, to people whose products are spanning multiple of those use cases. And if you'd like to come and bring a product, whether that's just data can be really useful. You don't always need an endpoint. We can load your data onto an endpoint and then make that available to people. You could actually have a client app. You could have a server or some other kind of system that makes data available. And of course, when we're talking about patient summary, you might have a generator or a reviewer, or in terms of requesting, you might have a filler, you might have a placer, and a whole number of other different things to come along in that event for 1 day and kind of connect with a whole bunch of other people and go through and test the very latest baseline before it goes out to ballot. So I very muchly welcome people who would like to come along to that. Please do. Just a quick reminder, registration closes end of next week. That's a hard close. So please make sure you have registered by then if you'd like to attend. Okay, that's it. For updates and where we are, let's actually go through potential changes for R2. Start with the normative ones. First up in the agenda is this one. And I think this was you, Landon. Did you want to share your screen, or would you like me to keep sharing?
I can share my screen. We'll see how that goes.
Okay.
Great. Can you see the batch ID and immunization lot number ticket?
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay, cool. So my name is Landon Riley from Best Practice Software. Daniel Bancroft, also from Best Practice Software, raised a ticket, which I'll talk through now. This ticket proposes that the immunization lot number should be must support in both AU Core Immunization and patient summary immunization profiles. This would align AU Core with national reporting obligations for AIR, the Australian Immunisation Register, where batch numbers are mandatory, and particularly important for managing batch-related issues like product recalls, and would also support transfer of care by ensuring receiving clinicians have the details they need for follow-up care. So this proposal is to transmit the vaccine batch information as a must support where it is available through the immunization lot number. I'll share some slides now if this works. All right, cool. So what is a batch ID? Sometimes called a batch or lot number. It's a unique identifier linked to a specific product or production run of vaccines. It helps track vaccines to manufacturing details and supports things like reporting and safety monitoring. So these points here on the screen outline batch ID guidance in Australia. So legal obligations under the Australian Immunisation Register Act, batch numbers have a mandatory reporting requirements associated with them. The TGA, or Therapeutic Goods Administration, monitors adverse events using batch information. So if a safety signal is detected, they assess whether a batch issue might be involved, helping them manage risks appropriately. The AIR also has reporting where they must supply not recorded, which we're not going to worry about with the JIRA ticket. It's just an interesting FYI. And the Australian Immunisation Handbook recommends recording vaccine brand, batch number, dose number, etc. So its inclusion is good documentation practice for immunisation recording. So as we can see, there's already a lot of clear and consistent guidance in Australia around capturing batch numbers. I'll go to the next slide. So our ticket that Danielle raised recommends including lot number in both AU Core Immunization and patient summary, which would just be inherited, I imagine, with a must support obligation. So must support means that you should transmit the batch number when it is available or if you have it. Having batch information available helps support safety monitoring, product recalls, and better clinical decision-making. Batch numbers are critical for investigations by the TGA when managing vaccine-related risks. It aligns with the AIR mandatory reporting requirements and also helps transfer of care, making sure receiving clinicians have the information they need for safe follow-up care. So I guess I can do a super quick walkthrough of what that might look like. AU Core doesn't really mention or talk to anything to do with lot number at this point, nor does BASE. But in R4 International, we have the lot number here, which sits underneath immunization. The cardinality is currently 0 to 1. I guess this proposal would be to bring in must support for this item, so it would appear here and have the same obligations for responder and requester, populate if known for a responder, and no error for requester. So what I might do now is just throw out to any questions. Does anyone have any questions around this one? That's fundamentally the proposal. I guess just to have must support. Oh, Sanjeet has a question. Yes, go ahead, Sanjeet.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll put my question in the chat as well. Vaccinated overseas. A scenario will be defense personnel who's been deployed overseas. The product might support it, but there might not be a batch ID. I'm just checking if that's a valid scenario. Then how would that be handled?
Oh, I guess if you don't have, it's just must support. So if you don't have it, you would not provide it. And because the cardinality is 0 to 1, you just would not provide it. So it's only if you have it would you provide it, because then it provides significant value. But if you don't have it, that's fine to just not include it, is our proposal for the must support.
A way the must support shows up is if it's an obligation on the software rather than upon the data instance. So the software has to be able to populate it, and it has to be populating it when it has it available. So if the data's not there, you can't do it. So it's, in a sense, it's a system obligation rather than a data obligation.
Agreed. Yes. Michael.
Any consideration for a search parameter on it as well?
We have not thought that far ahead for search parameter. We're not sure. Actually, it would be possibly valuable, but this Jira ticket does not propose that.
Yeah, just curious if something you need.
Yeah, it makes sense if someone's doing like a query to find out which vaccines they need to recall and stuff in the future. But I guess just getting the information exchanged was the primary factor here.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah, but that could be something in the future potentially.
Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, I'd like to, oh no, yes, hand up, Nairi. Can't hear you, Nairi, sorry.
Oh, no. Can you hear me now?
Better, yes, I can. It's faint though, so if you could speak up.
Okay, no problem. Sorry. My understanding with this requirement from AIR was the fact that there was actually 4 parameters that needed to be collected as part of the reporting process. Is that still the standard requirement? It's not just batch ID?
From what I read, there are multiple things that you need to include, but this particular ticket was only to include the batch number. But I think you're right. I think they do have extra requirements, which could be a Jira ticket, which would be incredibly valuable to add that as well as a future Jira ticket. Ticket.
Yeah, that's okay.
Completely agree. But this is only for batch at this point, just to get that in.
Yep, no problem.
Great, thank you.
All right, I have one question. Stephen Chu has also answered some of the chat, but I'd be interested in hearing your perspective, Landon. Are there circumstances in which we don't want to share / it's not relevant to share batch number in terms of being associated with sharing immunization information?
Good question. I'd probably need to follow up on that one. I would have thought that you would always want to provide it, but there might be circumstances I don't know about where you might not want to, but I can't think of any.
I can't think of any either.
Thanks, Landon and Stephen. Okay, are there any other questions or comments before we look to consider a motion? All right, I'm not hearing anything and not seeing anything further in the chat. So Landon, did you want to make a motion on this?
Yes, please. I would like to make a motion to put a must support obligation on lot number for AU Core resource immunization.
Thank you. Who would like to second? I
will second that.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Are there any other comments or questions while we're moving to the vote?
It's probably just a thing of clarification. So there's must support, and the thing is, maybe we should describe this as saying we want to put must support on this element with the standard obligations that we have elsewhere in AU Core.
Thank you, Richard. So that's a friendly amendment to clarify the motion to be addition of must support with the default AU Core obligations associated with that.
Brilliant.
Okay. Landon and Stephen, are you happy with that friendly amendment?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions before I put up the poll? Okay, you should now see that poll come up on your screen. For those of you who can't vote, like Landon, please put it in the chat. And if you've dialed in, please say your name and whether you are affirmative, negative, or abstain for that current motion.
Landon as a +1.
Thank you, Landon. Okay, I'm going to count that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I will end that poll. So with the verbal addition from you, Landon, that is 34 affirmative, 0 negative, and 4 abstain. The motion carries. We will add must support to immunisation.lot number and apply the default AU core obligations associated with must support. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. So back on the agenda is the next one. Do we have Rob on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Fantastic. Are you happy to share? Did you want me to share screen? Are you happy to share screen around the JIRA?
I'd like to share screen if that's all right.
Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. If those who don't know me, my name's Rob Eastwood. I work in the ADHA clinical informatics team. And the reason I am presenting this proposal for adjusting AU Core Encounter is a direct result of the recent work that was done to introduce the new AU Core Healthcare Service profile. So this, to me, seems like a natural extension, as in the broad use of the word extension, a natural progression from healthcare service. So this JIRA ticket was one we paid attention to in the development of the healthcare service proposal. And the salient bits to note are, first of all, that it is a deferred ticket. This was this time last year, and it was believed this ticket would be for future consideration once healthcare service profile is introduced. So that's where we are. And the other salient bits to me are about intending to better capture and support healthcare service within the encounter record. And the other bits about healthcare service. And then the other bits to, I think, pay attention to are that to remove must support from encounter service provider. But mainly my view is about the support for healthcare service. So this is talking about here specifically about a pre-adoption of the R5 extension. So I'm going to switch to the current AU Core Encounter profile. So this is the AU Core Encounter in a continuous integration build, and its differential table is as such. And there's down the bottom here, we've got the service provider with the supports. I just wanted to also particularly draw your attention to in the snapshot, given that this is a derived profile from AU base encounter, there is an extension which is about the R5 pre-adoption. There is, in R4, there's no sort of native means of including a healthcare service with encounter, but R5 does. And this extension was brought about in order to meet that need, really. However, in the so it exists in AU base, and if you take a look at it, it's about the context of use, by the way, is about any resource, but it does talk about healthcare service under which the patient was managed during an encounter, and it just is a simple reference to the healthcare service resource. So that's really the intent here is to, we now have a new healthcare service AU Core profile. Can we make use of it in the AU Core Encounter in order to specifically call it out and explicitly support that that capability? So therefore, it would be to, in fact, I've got a local build here. So C drive local build, which is just a mock-up of, what it could be, just to give you some idea about where the thinking is, to explicitly include that extension, which is again derived from AU base, and call out specifically, change the reference type to be the AU Core Healthcare Service profile. And while we're here to put on the must supports and obligations in the standard way, so that's really the guts of it. And
before we go to
yes,
comments, I'll note the in an artifact sense, I love the simplicity of what you're currently showing on the screen, and we've tried this before, and Graham has informed us we cannot progress with that way. We would need to create a profile of an extension in order to do that, like how we did with sex assigned at birth. So it is absolutely feasible to set the rules that you are suggesting, just through creating a profile of the AU base extension itself. And then, yes.
Sure. Yeah, I did wonder about the actual mechanism. So yes, that sounds like obviously the better approach.
And then I think we'd actually need to set an invariant. Actually, we can look at it. It's possible. I'll say it's slightly more complex, but it is possible.
Yeah. Yeah. So okay. So my proposal is I'll just swing this one in screen. Is to explicitly add it by the mechanism you've just suggested, and plus minus invariant, to reference the healthcare service profile, add the must support and obligation flags, and the JIRA ticket did refer to this part. That part about removing it from service provider, I haven't really, other than just simply removing it, I don't really have any other background other than just responding to that JIRA ticket request. If this is done, then we would need to also attend to any example updates to demonstrate that usage. And about the search parameters, as an extension, there is no, of course, sort of default search parameter, and I don't think it's worthy of creating a custom search parameter at this stage of the game.
Okay, so to sort of, there's 2 points here. One is the suggestion that service provider shouldn't have must support and obligation on it in AU Core. I mean, service provider still exists in R5, so that's one part of the issue. I feel there are two things here. One is proposing removal of must support and obligation from service provider, and that the business need for which you would be capturing service provider is best suited by healthcare service. And then there's the attendant association. Well, how do you do healthcare service in an AU Core R4 profile? The original JIRA proposes pre-adopting R5, and your amended proposal is to make use of the AU base extension associated healthcare service. Just sort of trying to summarize the two separate points there, because I think we'll need to discuss both of them.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so comments and questions, and please, I guess, state whether or not when you want to talk about it or ask a question, if it's kind of like the whole thing in general, or if you're more talking about one part of what's being proposed, because it's composite. Brett.
Yep. So this is actually my ticket. So I think there's a couple of moving parts to this, which I think Danielle's noted. That existing extension that is defined in AU base, I think has since we have the potential to pre-adopt something from R5, in fact, I think that should really be considered, which is really not an AU Core issue. It's a firework group AU base issue, to assess the life cycle of that extension and whether it should be continued to be used. So the other, I did prep a counter proposal as well. So I might, if that's all right, I'll share that.
Yes, please go ahead.
As I go. So I'll probably just take people through what, now hopefully, can you see? Yep, fire profile, I hope so. Yep, cool.
Encounter,
So,
for encounter, yes. And
yeah,
now slides.
Okay. Now slide. Yeah, I'll just run out of this view. The yeah, so basically I have some slides just to put something on the record too in terms of what I was thinking. So basically we have the R4 encounter, which doesn't have, which Rob sort of said as well, it doesn't have any way to reference healthcare service. We have this extension defined in AU base to allow us to reference a healthcare service from encounter. It doesn't really define how it relates in that extension, but it does kind of allow you to do that. And in R5, it is now supported, so it might be worth looking at the R5 stuff better. So it would be bigger. So in the participant part of encounter, there's an actor there, and one of the available actors now is healthcare service. If you compare that to R4, we don't have that option in R4. So we've just got the practitioner role related person. So yeah, my ticket alluded to pre-adopting R5 to allow us to have this kind of participation. It does come with the upside that you can represent some more sophisticated types of participation if you wanted to, which is not really what I was asking, but it sort of fits the pattern of what you can do in R5. So yeah, so I think with that, it's about, I guess, deciding on how to progress this to get the outcome, I think, which is still desirable to be able to associate the healthcare service to encounter in a meaningful way. So just to allude to the pre-adoption stuff, so if you haven't seen this before, I've referenced this as well. There's a methodology to allow essentially a standard way to pre-adopt elements from future versions of FHIR from an existing one. So in R4, we can reference forward into R5 and R6 to pick up particular elements and the way they're defined there, and be able to include them in our content. So yeah, so I think it's quite possible to build a profile on that pre-adoption extension to be able to be included. So
Can I just ask a clarifying point there? Similar to, and I've not, but okay, I've never tested that, and I just wanted to check. So with the proposal that Rob was putting forward, I am aware that that's absolutely technically feasible. We know how to do it. Whether or not we want to, that's what we're talking about now. We know how to. For what you were describing, and this is interesting, is it the same element name? So it is in the R5 encounter resource. It is participant.actor. So
it's actually because it's a backbone extension. I think you just refer to participant, and that lets you then use the sub elements within that extension. So it's essentially a complex extension that it's the same kind of methodology. But yeah, and it is, if you look at, the R6 documentation actually is good. It covers even adding types and other things as well. So I believe it's, I believe it. Yeah, I'm just getting across this myself, but it kind of, it says, you can certainly use it to add types, or also if there's cardinality changes. So you have just a single entry and you want to do multiple, right?
Okay, so just, and for the minutes, just to record that we've assessed that even if it's still the same element name, the fact that we can pre-adopt in R5 to add a type, that is feasible. Okay, I wasn't sure of that, and that's what I wanted to ask.
Tooling wise, I have not verified anything in terms of it actually works with validators or anything like that. But that would be
it's defined as an intentional potential use
Yeah,
of
it
pre-adoption?
actually calls out.
Okay.
Yeah, it actually calls out specific things like type changes and cardinality changes as being something you can do.
Okay,
which was one of the
okay.
concerns we had. Yeah. So it's I have to. I'm getting across. I'm not sure. Yeah, if these definitions are different. Like I'm looking at the R6 definitions. So it's I think that's the current state of where things are at.
And Millie's put in a comment also that Halo's done the kind of backport in their IG and it worked. Thank you. I was very hoping we had some evidence of that was possible. Okay, and Heath? You're on mute, Heath, if you're speaking.
Trying to get off. I pressed it about 3 times. We're getting pretty deep in the weeds here, obviously, around how we would do it. I'm just wondering if we can go back a step and actually ask if there is an actual requirement to do it. Given some of our, I guess, AU core principles, which is, that there is substantial use across systems within the Australian context for such a element to be must support.
Yes. So on the line, is anyone looking to associate? Okay, that's probably to link the healthcare service as a participant to the encounter in their use case and would make use of this inclusion.
I don't know of any myself personally.
Millie's kind of alluded to that maybe she has.
Not for HealthcareService. We've done backports elsewhere. We have in fact considered HealthcareService for encounter. There were some points, but it hasn't been a priority we found other ways to represent the data. So we might use it, but not sure.
Okay. Rosemary?
Yes. So in hospitals, we certainly do use the service, but whether it's and as a service of the provider, informing us what consultant group they belong to, for example.
Such as a unit?
Well, yes, such as a unit. Yes, such as a unit. Well, not really as a unit, but more of, because the units then group up, it's more of what their services are, right? But yes, it comes down to what is the definition of that healthcare service rather than the service of the provider, right? It does move from the individual to the facility, doesn't it?
Thank you, Rosemary.
I guess where I'm coming from is, this healthcare service is something that's just being added into the system. We're obviously looking for, we're moving towards a provider directory mechanism that is going to represent these services. And then at that point, we're probably in a position where we can start to leverage it within our clinical information itself. But at this point in time, without those sort of, as kind of Rosemary alluded to, what is a healthcare service and how is it defined within our Australian context ecosystem of systems, then it may be a little bit early for us to start including it into our clinical profiles. Let's get some experience.
That's a good point. If we have one evidence of potential linkage, but it's not, that is an indicator for discussion. But you're right, Heath, it doesn't meet our inclusion principles for being set in AU Core itself.
I think there's plenty of, there's actually prior art for healthcare service concepts existing. I mean, provider directory and secure messaging identity is built around healthcare service. And
sorry, the specific issue is linking it to encounter. Not, I think we're all quite clear on including healthcare service. That's not under dispute that healthcare
Yeah.
service is valuable.
Yeah, it's just putting encounters in a context of the service delivery, right? So at the moment, we can link it to the providing organisation, perhaps location, right? And that's not linking it to a healthcare service as such, and as a kind of primary identity. I mean, it's also like a PCA identity for the Provider Connect Australia for sharing healthcare service identity kind of content. So I think it's how do you know where encounter details were delivered with that, and this is really important when you start to share data across systems, because you need to know where the encounters happened, right? Some of them will be your own encounters that are in part of your system, and that's easy enough to produce them. But some of in the context of your service delivery of your EMR, but as soon as you go to share those, it's going to be harder to know where encounters actually happened. So that's kind of, I think, the reason why you have it. Yeah.
In the interest of time, and I think what we're probably going to need to do, sounding like by the discussion, is actually move to a series of actions around this for consideration. Can I also?
This is my next slide. Yeah, because this was just the proposal. Like, because I think this is really, I think the actual methodology on how we represent this relationship is more of a firework group problem. And so I think if the thing is, like, obviously you can decide what to do in AU Core right now, or if you should do it at all. But I think as well, I just really wanted to highlight it. I don't think that extension is the right answer. Knowing that there's a pre-adoption available. So I think it's something that we should anyway push back to the firework group to say, let's have a look at that and say, is this the most appropriate way to represent that concept? Which is, just a way to say, what is the right way to do this? And then the actual decision on whether to do it and how to do it right now, if that's on the cards, I think we kind of leave that to AU Core and say,
okay.
Yeah.
So your suggestion, this is there's pre-adopt and there's also an AU base extension, and your suggestion is that you would like to raise in an upcoming firework group. So this would actually be soon, yes. The consideration of whether or not AU base itself should be looking at pre-adopting or using that extension, and then can inform Core on the outcome of that, and we can then consider that. Yes, that's what you're proposing.
Yeah, I think yes. I think that should be an action anyway, and I think I will action it outside the group if it's not going to come from AU Core anyway. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a reasonable set of actions. You've raised a query on AU base and intend to consider it in that group. I would also like to think, is there, in terms of, we haven't had a strong response in terms of wanting to link healthcare service to encounter information. Obviously, you've raised this, Brett, and Rosemary's provided us some context, but it doesn't seem to be this strong burning need. I would like us to consider whether or not we can get more information on, is this something, perhaps a Zulip poll might be appropriate if someone wants to take that action. Someone who wants to progress this into Core, that's
it sounds like there's a few things here. One is the linking a good thing? Another one is, what's an appropriate mechanism for the linking? And the third one is, do we want to oblige people to support that linking?
Yes.
So there's at least those three things.
There is, and I think Brett's put his hand up too, and can we note that in the minutes, Brett, an action on you? Will you bring that to the next firework group, or at least, I guess, report back to us on where it's scheduled?
I think I'd create just a new ticket on that, and we'll work out the agendas for the firework group in terms of when. But obviously, this is kind of, I think there's the key decision about whether you want to go ahead with this right now, and if the answer's no, then that kind of is not so pressing. But if you say, I want to do this in this cycle, then we need to get it sorted.
I don't think we can as a point of order. We inherit and put rules on base.
Yeah. I'm just saying you need a decision out of base if you want to go ahead, right?
Sorry, Richard?
One bit associated with this is the issue, the JIRA issue, I think also included removing an obligation or a must support.
Yeah.
And we may want to remove that even if we don't actually add anything.
Yeah, that's my ticket.
I have no idea on that.
I'm not so because the point of that ticket originally was that I thought healthcare service is actually a better way to express the participation of a service provider than using service the service provider. What's it called? Yes, service provider element, which I think. Because what I wanted to avoid was people using that element for service.
We need to move to actions and put those together. Heath, please go ahead, but let's not have detailed content conversations now. We've got actions we need to undertake before we can make decisions later.
From an AU Core perspective, I'm just thinking that we leave the current card as it is, which is considered for future use, and we do nothing for now.
Noting there is an action Brett will undertake to go to the firework group to consider this. And Brett, if you don't want to progress the service provider D must supporting, that addresses that other part. And then we have the third part, which we noted, which is understanding if this actually really is a common, widely done thing, there is a wide need, which means it's, a potential inclusion for core. If it's not that widely wide of a requirement, it's not a minimum requirement, it doesn't belong in core. It belongs in a downstream IG. So I think there's that third one, and we need to understand how we can find that information out. Is that a Zulip poll? How can we go to the community and understand whether or not there actually really is a need for this?
I think, as you described, this is a question for Zulip to put it out to the wider community to seek input. That's clearly at the moment there's not much call for it. So let's actually get some information from the community. So we can take that on, get up a Zulip poll.
So put that action on you, Rob?
Yep.
Love it. Love a person associated with an action. Great. We'll have you. I'm happy to help. All right. Heath, your hand is still up. Is it? Oh, no. Okay. So I think that covers the 3 points. Brett's got an action. Go to the firework group. Look at this in base, but also we will look at whether or not we want to progress this need, and we have the action with Rob to have a Zulip poll. All right. Any other comments or things that people think we need to do on this item? All right. Let's move to the next set then.
I think you've muted yourself, Danielle.
I did. I have no idea how, but I managed to do that. Well done me. Anyway, I'm back. So we went through the normative items. That's great. We've still got time left, so we can progress these editorial. Let's go in order. These have been on the agenda for a bit. I believe on that first one, Dushi, you're going to speak to this. Did you want me to click on that, or are you happy to share screen? How would you like to take this through?
I can share my screen. Just do that now.
You want to share screen?
Oh, yes. Can you hear me?
Sorry, just prerequisite.
Yes, we can
if
hear
you want to
you.
share screen, I need to stop.
Yes. I will share screen. Yes.
I can hear you. Do you want to share screen?
Yes. Can you see it now?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, my connection's
Yes.
slow, and I think pretty much everyone's aware of that now. All right. So this one is just a quick clarification request regarding the existing profile comparison section in AU Core. The comment is asking why IPA and IPS are included in the profile comparison table and suggests it might be helpful to clarify that. So I will just quickly show the section in AU Core. So this is the comparison section where we list AU Core profiles and we compare them to profiles in we list details of the comparison of profiles from AU Core with profile in IPA, IPS, and US Core. And at the moment, there is no explanation of why IPA and IPS are included in this comparison. I think it would be helpful to add some context around that. It would provide a useful information for implementers. So I would suggest that we add something to this page to clarify that. There is some proposed wording in the JIRA ticket resolution. I don't know if everyone can see that. I'll make it a little bit bigger, hopefully more helpful. So we suggest that we add something along this wording to say that these are referenced as many of the AU Core profiles are expected to be adopted in Australian localizations of these international standards in the future. And unless there are some comments or concerns or questions, I'd like to make a motion.
Can you go back to the page comparison with other national ones? Okay. Sorry, so we have a look at that, and it does point to the relationships. Okay. And so the proposal is to add an extra sentence. Would that be below, I guess, those bullet points to talk about, to add a bit more context there?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I understand that. Are there other comments or questions about the editorial improvement that is being suggested?
I have a grammatical comment, but that's all.
On this page or on
No, on the
JIRA?
proposal, on the JIRA
Okay,
proposal.
can you go back to that one, Dushi?
Yes.
What would you suggest be changed so that when the motion is made, it's consistent?
Okay, I'd move in future from where it is to after the word expected.
So IPA and IPS are specifically referenced as many of the profiles defined in AU Core are expected in future to be adopted in Australian localizations of these international standards.
That's my suggested grammatical change.
Okay. Are there any other suggestions for change? All right. Are there any other comments or questions before we look to entertain a motion? Okay, Dushi, are you happy with the friendly amendment or the suggested change to the resolution description from Richard?
I am, and I'm ready to make a motion.
Then
So,
please go ahead.
All right, I motion that we accept the proposal to add additional explanation of why these IGs are included in the comparison with a friendly amendment to move in future from the end of the sentence to after are expected. So it reads IP and IPS specifically referenced as many of the profiles defined in AU Core are expected in future to be adopted.
In Australian localizations.
In Australian localizations. So yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Who would like to second?
I'll second, Richard.
Thank you, Richard. Are there any other comments or questions while I'm going to the poll? Okay, I'm launching that poll now. You should see that. Please vote affirmative, negative, or abstain, including putting in the chat. Okay, over 70% of people have voted. We're just waiting for a few more. All right, I'm going to count that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I will end that poll. I will share the results. Landon, did you have a vote for this one?
Yes, +1 affirmative. It didn't work in the chat for some reason, but yes.
Okay, thank you. So with that vote, that is 23 affirmative, 0 negative, 6 abstain. The motion carries. We will make that editorial improvement to AU Core. Thank you.
Thank you. I will stop sharing my screen.
Okay, and I will start again. Okay, so we've done that first one. Good rate of progress, people. We're getting through it. Next one, security obligation references needed. This is 46880. Marvin, you were going to speak to this one. It's Marvin on the line.
I am.
Oh, yes. Perfect. Thank you. And we can see your screen. I can see the JIRA. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. I can't see it. That's all good. Okay, so actually I'll go to where we have defined, it's in AU Core, we've got a section on security and privacy. And one of the bits that we put in there, well, before I go through that, and really this is looking at some of the things that we are saying that people who are implementing the AU Core should consider. So for example, the system should conform to the fire communication security requirements, which are defined for R4 in the R4 specification. And this, has a whole bunch of details about how we should consider implementing solutions and the sorts of things that we should be adhering to. One of the only thing that we have done in specifically regarding the Australian specification is to say that the system should use the Australian Cybersecurity Centre TLS configuration guidelines, which is something which has been defined here. And this is primarily because the only thing that we're really focused on, or we specified, is that we should use TLS 1.2 and above for any API integration interactions. The JIRA that was raised is saying that there is a sentence in that section, which is the implementers of AU Core need to be aware of their obligations regarding security, privacy, and consent in Australia. So that's this sentence here in the AU Core specification. And the question is that this statement isn't useful without references or some further explanation. Looking at this, when you head down into the nitty-gritty of security, privacy, consent, and so on, there's a lot of information that you would need to take into consideration. And of course, there are many different implementation and requirements for implementers. So for some systems that are doing, I don't know, maybe federal type solutions as opposed to, solutions that are, running for patients and so on. There's a lot of things that you would need to adopt based on your particular situation. So adding a whole bunch of information in this and trying to cover all of those different types of scenarios we thought was outside of the scope of AU Core. And so we're thinking at the moment that this is a non-persuasive change and that we shouldn't be adding any additional statements. But we're open to suggestions from people as to what they think, if they're comfortable with that, or if they think there are things that we should be adding in addition to the statements that we've already made in the security and privacy page. So that's the kind of the nutshell of what we're looking at. And so I kind of open it up to people to, give their views or comments as to what they think, whether they think we need to add some more content in here around security, privacy, and consent, or whether that's left to the implementers to actually go and discover and work through for themselves based on their particular use case. So open for comments.
Thanks, Marvin. There's a question, Michael.
Yeah, Marvin, I was just going to agree with your statement there that the nature of AU Core being no specific use case, that it's extremely broad in the context that it could be used. And I think that was the intent of this statement. Basically, depending on what you're building, in what jurisdiction, and what it needs to do, like there's a whole heap of different things that might apply. And this was basically just pointed to say, hey, make sure you're aware of your own obligations, right? And they could be anything. But yeah, it would be quite hard to call them out and not constrain certain use cases. If we were too prescriptive in here, we might constrain solutions. And we may miss things if we tried to list everything off as well.
Yep, agreed. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Michael. Are there any other comments or questions around that? Richard, you've got off mute, but I can barely hear you. Not really.
Yoni.
It sounds like you're across the room. Sorry. Yoni, while Richard is solving his audio issues.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. As much as I'm interested to actually just read somewhere in Australia where it does actually tell you exactly what you need for security and privacy, because it's all over the shop and you just keep going from one web browser to another. But I do think that we will, in this particular form, will constrain by making more statements, because it is very individualized to state by state, state laws, and so on and so forth, right? We can go through the list, and I don't think it's the role of this form to actually constrain as well, and we are risking constraints. I agree.
Thanks, Yoni. Oh, yes, we can hear you, Richard.
Okay. Yeah, look, I think a couple of things to be done here. One is to say, can we improve, we can't give the answers. Can we improve the sentence so that it satisfies Andy's concern that this is not particularly helpful? And in effect, the sentence is saying there's some important stuff here and you won't find the information in any one place, so you're just going to have to remember to do the work. That seems to be sort of what the sentence offers. You could say it's a bit like saying make sure your system runs, or make sure, or something like that. Excuse me.
Thanks, Richard. Does anyone have well, I suppose we would ask for a specific suggestion.
Sorry, I had a local interruption there. Yeah, so that was about, I was thinking maybe if all we're doing here is giving a motherhood statement, maybe we need to just, in a sense, reflect that and say that we're not trying to tell you what to look for or where to look. We're just trying to say, remember, this is a space that you do have to pay attention. And if that's what we're trying to do here, then maybe that's not the best sentence, but I don't know how to do it better.
Okay. Michael?
I was just going to suggest there is no specific obligation on this. So there's no should, shall, may. It is just a statement. So there is actually no specific conformance obligation on it. It really is just that guiding statement. So yeah, if someone had better wording, we could change it.
Does anyone, just in the chances that someone might, does anyone have any better wording to suggest? If not, we could progress with what Marvin has suggested, which is that we go non-persuasive, noting that that does not close the door if people identify later on some better wording and can suggest a specific proposal on how to word that clearer. Yoni, do you have a suggestion?
Sorry. Look, I mean, maybe the word need is the problem there, and I'm just suggesting our ask to be aware. That could just mean, you know, that we are not saying to you where or what to do, but you just need to be aware that there's something out there that you need to be compliant with, and we're not here to tell you. So I ask to be aware instead of need to be aware. It's a small change, but it might be a better language. Welcome to disagree.
Okay, so that's a potential suggestion. Are there others? I'm just typing out the suggestion now in the chat so that we can consider it. I think that's what you've said, Yoni. Implementers of AU Core are asked to be aware of their obligations regarding security, privacy, and consent in Australia. All right.
Yeah, that would be, you know, enough for me to just say, look, I get it, and not be obliged for any more from this one.
I'm happy to proffer a suggestion. Oh, Michael, you go first.
I personally prefer need, because I mean, you do, when you're implementing a system, need to be aware of your obligations regarding security, privacy, and consent in Australia. Like, it is a need on system implementers to do that. While we're not providing a conformance statement on that, we're not saying you should or shall, and we're not going to test you for that as part of AU Core conformance. It is a need, I would have seen. And if we're saying ask, I'm wondering who's doing the asking. But
yeah, I think I prefer need. I think it's something that it's important that people do pay attention to, as if you were, you know, when you're building your systems, there is you know, one of the requirements that you have is to pay attention to security and privacy and so on. So I think this is just stating that explicitly, that you need to go look this up as opposed to we think it might be a nice idea for you to do it. That's just my perspective anyway.
So where are we landing then? Where I'm hearing a couple of voices saying, look, let's just keep it as it is. We can keep revisiting this. I know we've got a suggestion from Yoni. I've put one in the chat, but I don't particularly like my suggestion better, so I'm not going to advocate for it. All right. Are there any other comments or questions we want to make on potential wording improvements? Because I think it's quite clear that we all agree that we do not want to be more specific, and that this is a motherhood statement, and it's about the best wording that we currently have is what we're looking for.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to propose that we go with non-persuasive and leave the text as it is. So I'd like to motion that the request is non-persuasive, and we leave the text as is, as specified in the existing implementation guide.
Thank you. Heath, is that a seconder, or do you have another contender into the ring for wording?
No, I'm not. I'm just asking about keeping things open for future suggestions if someone does bring this forward, or are we closing that off and having like the revisit scenarios around this? I'm just getting some.
It wouldn't be a revisit, just for point of order. The suggestion was the JIRA issue in particular was about making specific references, not about just improving the wording. Yep. So anyone can propose specifically a wording improvement on
In that case, then I'll
not considered
second.
revisit. Okay, so Heath is happy to second. Are there any other comments or questions while I bring up the vote? All right, I will, oops, clicked on the wrong thing. Okay, you should see it come up for you now, which is the motion to be non-persuasive, to make a change. See if that's work landed. Please vote affirmative, negative, or abstain. Right, only 65% have participated. We do need more. Please vote affirmative, negative, or abstain. Okay, I'm going to count that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll end that poll and share the results. So with the inclusion in the chat, that is 20 affirmative, 0 negative, 9 abstain. The motion carries. We are going to pass that as non-persuasive. I think someone needs to go on mute. I'll just do that for them. Okay, so we've come to the end, I think, of where we need to be for JIRAs. I won't start another one because we've only got 6 minutes left. We should carry over any. I'll just show you what they are. At the moment, noting these are in editorial or informative, we will carry over these bottom 3 into the next meeting. If out of the JIRA assessment or consideration of changes for AU Core, someone proposes to add a JIRA or a topic for discussion that is normative, that will go up into the priority list. But otherwise, we'll carry these 3 into the next meeting. All right, thanks everybody for that. I'll just do a quick recap then. Next set of meetings, JIRAs. That's what we're doing. JIRAs, a little bit more on ballot. Prioritising any normative changes to make sure we can carry those changes into testing. We'll also look to get updates on those actions. So we'll have a look. Potentially, I expect the poll will be out, and whether or not there are any outcomes from the next firework group meeting relating to the use of the AU-based extension on HealthcareService. Can I ask, are there any other items to put on the agenda besides what I just clarified? Reporting on the actions and carrying over of the JIRAs. Is there anything else that people would like to have on the agenda for our next meeting? All right, I'll add one briefly, which was doing ballot planning. Apologies, forgot about that. I even stuck it on an image and forgot to actually put it in the agenda. Oops. Okay, so that's going to be our next meeting. Is there anything else, any other comments or updates people would like to make before we close this meeting? All right, let's close here. Thank you very much. Appreciate everyone working through those issues. I'll see you in a fortnight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.